My son hit me over a bowl of unsalted soup. Yes. Exactly like that. Every word is the truth. No matter how absurd it sounds when spoken out loud. Last night, the same son I spent my whole life loving, my whole life protecting, struck me until I bled. And while I was on my knees on the kitchen floor, wiping up my own blood with an old rag, he calmly went to his room, closed the door, and fell asleep as if nothing had happened. This morning, I woke up with an aching body and a cut on my lip that still stings whenever I try to speak. But the deepest pain isn't physical. It's the humiliation. It's the bitter realization that to him, I am just the maid. But this isn't the story of a long-suffering mother crying in silence. This is the story of what happened next, of the one thing that he, in all his arrogance, could never have anticipated. Can a woman who has been pushed to the very edge become the most formidable opponent of all? The crack in the porcelain. My name is Helen Peterson. I am 67 years old. I used to think that if I could just raise my son right, I would have no regrets in this life. But then, one day, I learned a hard truth. Some things, no matter how freely you give them, are never returned. It started with soup, the sting on my cheek, hot, sharp. It blossomed into a dull ache that seemed to settle deep in my bones. My son, my Daniel, has a strong backhand. I never knew that before tonight. He was standing over me, all 6'2" of him, a giant in my small kitchen. His gray suit was immaculate, the one he wore for important sales meetings. His shadow fell across the floor, covering the wreckage of the porcelain bowl and the pail. Lukewarm vegetable soup splattered across the linoleum. No salt, he said. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion. That was the most chilling part, not the shouting I had grown used to. But this cold, flat pronouncement, as if he were a judge delivering a sentence. No salt. 2 words. For 2 words. My cheek was on fire and my lip was starting to swell. I could taste the metallic tang of blood. I didn't say anything. I just stayed on the floor, my hand gently touching my face. The tiles were cold against my knees. I watched as he looked down, not at me, but at the mess. He let out a sigh of annoyance, like a man inconvenienced by a spill. Then he turned, walked to his room, and closed the door behind him. A soft click, the sound of finality, as if hitting his own mother were the most normal thing in the world, as if I were just another broken object on the floor. The silence in this house, it has a weight to it. It presses down on you. I stayed there for a long time, listening to it, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Each tick felt like a drop of water wearing away a stone, the stone of my dignity. I could see the pieces of the bowl scattered near my hand. It was from the good set, the one my late husband, Robert, and I bought for our 25th anniversary. White porcelain with a thin blue line around the rim. Simple, elegant. Now, it was just sharp, jagged fragments, like a broken promise. Slowly, I picked up an old rag from under the sink and began to wipe up my own blood, mixed with the soup, my soup. I had simmered it for hours, chopping the carrots and celery into perfect little squares, just the way he liked. I thought it might make him smile. It seems like a lifetime ago, but it was only 3 years. 3 years since Daniel came back home. He showed up at my door one rainy Tuesday night, with a single suitcase and the look of a lost little boy, the same look he had when he was 8 and his father left us. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive coat was damp, and his eyes were hollow. "Mom," he'd said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "The divorce, she took everything. I have nowhere else to go. A mother's heart is a foolish thing. It has a memory all its own. I saw my 40-year-old son, a successful sales director, but all my heart could picture was the little boy with scraped knees who used to run into my arms for comfort, the one who cried when he saw a bird with a broken wing. I opened the door. Of course, I opened the door. The rain was dripping from his hair onto my welcome mat. "This will always be your home, Danny," I had told him, wrapping my arms around him. The expensive wool of his coat felt cold and foreign, but I held on tight, always. How naive I was. I didn't know I wasn't welcoming home a son. I was letting in a tenant, a landlord, a warden, and I was inviting him to live in my house. Rent-free. Not just in a spare room, but inside my very soul. The weight of a favor. The first few months were gentle, or so I told myself. Daniel was quiet, wounded. He'd leave early for work. His shoulders slumped, and come home late, smelling of takeout food and exhaustion. We'd eat together in near silence at this very kitchen table. I'd make him pot roast, the way he loved it as a boy, with extra carrots. He'd eat, thank me quietly, and retreat to his room. I saw it as healing. I thought I was giving him a safe harbor to mend his broken heart. I was so proud. My son, the successful sales director, even in his darkest hour, was still fighting. I'd iron his shirts just right, with a crisp crease down the sleeve. I'd pack him a small lunch, a thermos of coffee. Little things. The things a mother does to say I love you without needing the words. Then, the small comments started. They were like tiny pebbles dropped into a still pond. You barely noticed them at first. But the ripples, they spread. Mom, this roast is a little dry tonight, he'd say. Not unkindly, just a statement of fact. So, the next time, I'd baste it every 10 minutes. Are you wearing that sweater again? The color, it washes you out. He'd mention, his eyes on his phone. So I pushed the sweater to the back of my closet. They were just comments. He was stressed. He was rebuilding his life. I should have seen it then, but a mother's heart is a foolish thing. It makes excuses. It papers over the cracks. The real shift came about 6 months in. It was a Sunday. I was at the table, paying my bills. The way I've done for 45 years. The way I've done for 45 years. A simple stack. The electric bill. The water bill. The property tax. Daniel walked in, coffee mug in hand, and looked over my shoulder. You're still doing this by hand, he asked. A small smile on his face. Mom, everything's online now. It's so much easier. Safer. 2. I suppose I'm old-fashioned. I like the feel of the paper, the certainty of a stamp. I managed just fine. Danny, I told him. He pulled up a chair. His voice was so reasonable, so caring. I know you do, but you've worked your whole life. You shouldn't have to worry about due dates and checkbooks. Let me help. I can set it all up for you. Link your pension to an online account. Everything gets paid automatically. You won't have to lift a finger. He made it sound like a gift. A vacation from responsibility. He was my son. A successful man who understood finances. I was a retired legal secretary. What did I know about the modern world of banking? So I let him. I gave him my passwords, my account numbers, my trust. A few weeks later, he came to me with another piece of paper. It looked important, official, full of small print that made my eyes swim. What's this? Honey, I asked. It's a power of attorney. Mom, he said. His tone casual. He placed it on the table next to my reading glasses. It's just a formality, a safeguard. You know, in case something ever happens to you. If you get sick or can't make decisions, this just lets me step in and make sure your bills are paid, that you're taken care of. It's what responsible children do for their parents. He made it sound like an act of love, of profound responsibility. He pointed to the line at the bottom. You just sign here. And I did. I picked up the pen, and with a simple swirl of ink, I signed my independence away. I didn't know it then. I thought I was being prudent. I thought I was making things easier for my loving, thoughtful son. After that, the pebbles became stones. He'd give me an allowance. From my own money, $100 a week for groceries and gas. It's easier to track the budget this way. Mom, he'd explain. When I wanted to buy a new dress for a church event, he sighed. Is that really a necessary expense right now? I stopped going to my weekly bridge game with Dorothy and the girls. I didn't have the $5 for the pot. I didn't have the heart to tell them why. He wasn't my son living in my house anymore. I was a tenant in his, an employee. The favor I had given my son, it had become the chain that bound my life. And I had been the one to hand him the key. The silent witness. The next morning came, gray, heavy, like a blanket draped over the window, trying to smother the light. My body ached. Every muscle felt bruised. My lip, though no longer bleeding, throbbed with a dull pulse. But it was the humiliation that truly stung. A burn deep inside. I got up, 5 o'clock, like every other day. Habits are hard to break, even when your world has shattered. Daniel was already in the kitchen, impeccably dressed in another gray suit, scrolling on his phone. He didn't look up when I walked in. He just spoke, a low rumble. Breakfast. Hurry. Big meeting. As if nothing. As if the night hadn't happened. As if my cheek didn't still burn. My hands trembled slightly as I cracked the eggs. 3 spoonfuls of shredded cheese. 2 slices of toasted bread. Black coffee. No sugar. Everything measured. Perfect. Because anything less was an explosion. While Daniel ate, the sound of a key in the front door lock echoed through the quiet house. Nicole, his wife, always elegant, always early. She walked in, wearing a light green dress and heels that clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. She kissed Daniel's cheek, a brief, practiced gesture. Then she sat at the table, as if she owned the place. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," she said. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. The voice she only used when Daniel was around. It was a plastic smile, stretched thin. "How are you this morning?" she asked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to tell her that her perfect husband had beaten me until I bled, that my back was covered in bruises, that I couldn't take it anymore. But the words caught in my throat. I just smiled. It felt like my face would crack. "I'm fine. Thank you," I replied. My voice was a thin whisper. Daniel shot me a look, a warning. His eyes, cold and hard, clearly said, "One wrong word, and tonight will be worse." Then, that fake smile, the one he put on for an audience. "Look, Mom," he said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, expensive-looking compact. "I bought you this new makeup. It's perfect for covering those little scrapes. From when you tripped last night, little scrapes." That's what he called it. An accident. As if I had fallen. As if I had stumbled right into his fist. I took the compact. It was an expensive foundation. More than $50. He probably bought it with my own money. My pension. He managed everything. "For my own good," he said. At my age, I couldn't handle money anymore. I hadn't seen a penny of my pension in 2 years. Nicole was looking at him. Her eyes shone with a strange admiration. "You're so thoughtful, honey," she cooed. "Always taking care of your mom. If only she knew. If only she knew that her perfect husband, the successful sales director, came home every night to take out his frustrations on me." After breakfast, Daniel adjusted his red tie, grabbed his briefcase, and leaned in close. His breath was cold on my ear. "Remember what we talked about last night?" he whispered. "If you ever open your mouth, if you tell anyone what happens here, you're going to regret it. No one will believe you. You're just a crazy old woman living off her son's charity." His words chilled me to the bone. They left together, hand in hand. The perfect couple. I watched them from the window as they got into Daniel's new black sedan. It cost more than $400,000. My money. All of it. When the house fell silent, I sat in the kitchen, not crying tears of sadness, but tears of rage, of helplessness. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't keep living like this, but I didn't know how to escape this nightmare. I sat there for hours. The sunlight slowly crept across the kitchen tiles. This house used to be my sanctuary, my safe place. I bought it 30 years ago with the money I saved working as an executive secretary at Blackwood, Pearson Associates. 40 years of my life, dedicated to that job, getting up at 5 every morning, always on time, organizing other people's lives. I never imagined I'd end up a prisoner in my own home. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I hardly recognized the woman staring back. My lip was swollen and purple, a small cut at the corner of my mouth. My eyes were red, puffy from crying. The bruise on my neck looked like a dark stain spreading towards my collarbone. I opened the expensive foundation Daniel had given me. It was an imported brand, the kind elegant women like Nicole used every day. I started applying it, carefully, covering every mark, every bruise, Every piece of evidence of what really happened in this house. As I put on my makeup, I couldn't help but think about all the times I had done this before. How many mornings I had woken up to hide bruises, to invent excuses about falls and accidents. I tripped on the rug. The closet door slipped. I fell down the stairs, one lie after another, all to protect Daniel's reputation. To protect the image of a perfect son. A soft knock. At the back door, my heart jumped. Daniel was gone. Who could it be? I opened it slowly. It was Dorothy. Dorothy Price. My next-door neighbor, a widow. In her late 60s, she had always been kind to me. Her face was etched with concern. She held a casserole dish. "Helen, dear," she said, her voice soft. "I made some stew, and I heard some raised voices earlier. Is everything all right?" My heart began to race. She knew, or she suspected. I saw her eyes linger on my lip, even through the makeup. "Oh, Dorothy," I said, forcing a smile. It felt unnatural. "It's nothing. I just bumped into the pantry door last night. You know how clumsy I am." Dorothy frowned. She didn't push it, but her eyes, they held a deep, knowing pity. "Well, if you ever need anything, you know where I live. I'm always home in the afternoon." Her words, they went straight to my heart. It had been so long since anyone had offered me genuine help, since anyone had treated me with true kindness. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I wanted to tell her everything, to beg for her help, to confess the nightmare I was living, but Daniel's voice echoed in my head. "If you ever open your mouth, if you tell anyone what happens here, you're going to regret it. No one will believe you. You're just a crazy old woman living off her son's charity." "Thank you, Dorothy," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "You're very kind." She gave me another long, worried look. Then she left. The casserole dish warm in my hands, I closed the door, leaned against it. The silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Not so heavy. Dorothy's words, her kindness, it had planted something small inside me. A seed. I walked back to the bathroom, looked in the mirror again. The makeup, it was perfect. No one would ever know, but I knew. Dorothy knew, too. Maybe not the full story, but she knew something was wrong. In that moment, I realized something important. The silence, it could kill you. Sometimes, just one word, a single glance from another person, it's enough to remind you that you are not alone. And that connection, it is strength. I looked at my own reflection, not just a victim, not just a bruised old woman. I saw a flicker, something new, something resilient. In that moment, I didn't see a woman who had simply tripped. I saw a woman who needed to act. If you're still listening, please help me by commenting "keep going" below. Let me know that there are still companions walking with me on this journey. Your presence is the biggest encouragement for me to tell the final part of my story. How a mother fought for justice. The paper trail. After Dorothy left, the warmth from her visit faded. It was replaced by something else. Not fear, not sadness. Something cold and hard, like a small, smooth stone forming in the pit of my stomach. Daniel would be gone for hours. He had a sales conference in Houston. I knew this because he had left a detailed itinerary on the kitchen counter. A list of meetings and dinners. A performance of perfect professionalism. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. I watched from the window as it disappeared down the street. Then, I turned. My house was silent again. But this time, the silence was not an enemy. It was an opportunity. His office was what used to be my sewing room. He had taken it over when he moved in. It smelled of him. That sharp, expensive cologne, and something else. Something metallic. The smell of ambition. My heart, it was beating too fast. I pressed a hand to my chest, telling it to be still. For 40 years at Blackwood, Pierce, and Associates, my job was to be calm, to be precise, to handle the confidential documents of powerful men without letting my hands shake. I could do this. I started with the desk drawer, the top one. It was locked. Of course. It was locked. I went to the kitchen and came back with a butter knife. The trick is gentle pressure, not force. I learned that from opening stuck file cabinets for Mr. Blackwood. The lock clicked open. A small, satisfying sound. Inside, There were files, neatly labeled, car payments, student loans, personal. I pulled out the one marked household finances, HHS Peterson. My name? On his file, the rustle of paper, too loud. I froze. Listening. Nothing. Just the house settling around me. I took a breath and opened the folder. It was all there. Bank statements from my account. The one he helped me manage. I saw my monthly pension deposit. $2,400. And then I saw the withdrawals. Hundreds of dollars at a time. Transfers. Online purchases I never made. A charge for a steakhouse in Austin. A hotel in Dallas. A jewelry store. My money. My 40 years of getting up at dawn, of typing until my fingers ached, was paying for a life I knew nothing about. I felt a wave of nausea, but the cold stone in my stomach held me steady. I kept digging. At the bottom of the drawer, under the files, was a larger envelope. Manila, no label. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The floorboard creaked upstairs. My breath caught in my throat. Was he back? Did he forget something? I stood perfectly still, my ears straining. Silence. Just the old house groaning. My imagination. I pulled the papers out of the envelope. The letterhead at the top made my blood run cold. Willow Creek Savings and Loan. It was a loan document. A second mortgage. On my house, the house my late husband, James, and I had built. The house where I brought Daniel home from the hospital. The house where every wall held a memory. Every scratch on the floor told a story. My home. My sanctuary. The loan amount was for $150,000. The signature at the bottom was a cruel imitation of my own. He must have traced it from the power of attorney. The date was from 6 months ago. $150,000. Where had it gone? He didn't buy a new car. He didn't pay off his debts. So where? I saw another stack of papers on his desk, held down by a glass paperweight. They weren't in a file. They looked like statements from a different kind of account. One I didn't recognize. The name on it was Peterson Capital Ventures. The numbers were staggering. Losses. Huge. Gaping losses. Tens of thousands of dollars disappearing in a single day. He wasn't a sales director rebuilding his life. He was a gambler. A bad one. And he had been using my home, my entire life saving, as his personal casino chip. The air left my lungs. I had to sit down on the floor. Right there in my old sewing room. The room where I had once hemmed his school trousers and patched his Little League uniform. Now, it was the scene of the greatest betrayal of my life. I sat there, surrounded by the paper trail of my ruin. The numbers stared back at me. Cold, hard, undeniable. They told a story of deception so profound, it stole my breath. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The hurt was so deep, it went past crying. It settled into that cold, hard stone in my stomach. The stone was no longer just a feeling. It was a purpose. I thought about the men I worked for at Blackwood. Pierce and Associates. Powerful men. Men who could move mountains with a phone call and ruin fortunes with a whisper. I had organized their lives. I had handled their secrets. I had seen how they fought their wars not with fists, but with paper, with leverage, with information. And as I sat there on the floor, the truth of what I had to do began to form in my mind. Daniel thought I was just his mother, an old woman who cooked his meals and washed his clothes. He had forgotten who I was for 40 years. He had forgotten what I knew. I got up. My knees ached, but my hands were steady. I put every piece of paper back exactly where I found it. I closed the drawer. I wiped the butter knife clean. No trace. Then I went to my own room. To the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. I lifted the lid. The smell of cedar and mothballs filled the air. The smell of preserved memories. Underneath my wedding dress and Daniel's baby blanket, there was a false bottom, and underneath that false bottom was my own paper trail, my insurance policy, a collection of black leather-bound ledgers, my work diaries. Daniel thought he had taken everything from me. My money, my house, my dignity. He never realized I still owned his future, and the futures of some very powerful men. Blackwood. Pierce and Associates. The air in the offices of Blackwood, Pierce and Associates had a particular smell. It was a mix of old leather, expensive paper, and the faint, clean scent of ozone from the computer servers. It was the smell of power. For 40 years, I breathed that air. I was the executive secretary to Mr. Pierce himself. My title was simple, but my job was not. I was the gatekeeper, the scheduler, the memory keeper. The men of Blackwood, Pierce were giants. They moved in a world of whispers and handshakes that decided the fate of corporations and the futures of families. They spoke a language of contracts and clauses, of loopholes and liabilities. I never went to law school, but I learned that language. I learned to read between the lines. I learned that what wasn't written down was often more important than what was. I wasn't a lawyer. I was just a black woman from Willow Creek who could type 120 words a minute and had a mind for details. They saw me as a fixture, reliable, discreet, invisible, like the solid mahogany desk I sat at every day. And that invisibility, it became my greatest asset. They would have meetings in Mr. Pierce's office. Sometimes forgetting I was in the adjoining room, transcribing notes. They would discuss stock trades that happened a week before the public announcement. They would talk about which judge was friendly and which zoning board member could be persuaded. I heard it all, and I remember, early on, I started a habit. At the end of each day, I would take 5 minutes. In a simple, black leather-bound ledger, the kind you can buy at any office supply store, I would write things down. Not gossip, just fact. A date, a name, a stock symbol, a check number. I developed my own shorthand. A mix of symbols and abbreviations that no one else could decipher. I didn't do it for malice or for money. I did it as a form of insurance. In a world of sharks, you learn to build your own cage. I saw other secretaries, good women, dismissed without a second thought when a merger happened, or when a partner's new wife wanted to hire her own people. I decided, long ago, that would not be me. My ledger was my record, my proof that I was there. That I knew things. It was my quiet power. Over 40 years, I filled 5 of those ledgers. They were my real retirement plan. I lifted the first one from the cedar chest. The leather was cool and smooth beneath my fingers. I opened it to a random page, my own handwriting, neat and precise. Stared back at me. No violence. 14 1998 Sen. Thompson. Call W divided by C. E. O. N. of Petrocorp. 3 p.m. Stock purchase authorized 4:05 p.m. Merger announced Nova. Archie. Price jump trees dismid divi%. A simple entry, but it told a whole story. A story of insider trading. My son's lawyer, Mark Callahan. He was just a junior associate back then. Ambitious. Eager. He's a big shot partner now. Represents all the important people in town, including the current mayor, a man who used to be State Senator Thompson. The same Senator Thompson from my ledger. I ran my finger over the entry. The ink was slightly faded, but the facts were indelible. I remembered that day. Senator Thompson had been loud, boastful on the speakerphone, so sure of himself, and I was just the quiet woman in the other room, typing. My Daniel, he thought he was so smart, hiring the best lawyer in town, a man connected to power, a man who could make problems disappear. But Daniel only saw the present. He saw the powerful lawyer, the respected politician. He didn't see the foundation of that power. He didn't know that I was the one who had typed the memos, filed the reports, and recorded the quiet transactions that built their world. I closed the ledger. The soft thud of the cover echoed in the quiet room. All this time, I had kept these books as a shield for myself, a defense against a world that might one day discard me. I never once imagined the day would come when I would have to use it as a sword, and that the person I would have to point it at was my own son. I sat there on the edge of my bed, the weight of 40 years of secrets in my lap. The pain in my cheek had subsided to a dull throb. It was nothing compared to the slow, cold hardening of my heart. The love for my son was still there, a flickering ember deep inside, but it was being choked by the ashes of his betrayal. Daniel thought he was taking everything from me. My money, my house, my dignity. He never realized I still owned his future. A calculated whisper. Fear has a taste. It's bitter, metallic, like old pennies. For 3 years, that taste was all I knew. It was in the coffee I brewed in the morning, in the tasteless soup I ate for dinner. It was the air I breathed. But that night, as I sat in the quiet of my living room, the ledger resting on my lap, I tasted something new. It was the taste of purpose. My hands did not tremble as I opened the book. The spine creaked softly. A familiar sound from a forgotten life. My own handwriting stared back at me. Neat. Precise. The script of a woman who understood that details were not just details. They were ammunition. I didn't need to search. I knew exactly where to find it. Section G. Page 42. 1998. The year Daniel was a senior in high school, dreaming of a football scholarship. The year I worked late almost every night on the merger for a big oil company, and the year a certain state senator, a rising star named Marcus Thorne, made a very timely investment in a small tech firm just 2 days before the merger was announced, a firm that Blackwood, Pierce & Associates just happened to represent. Mr. Blackwood himself had dictated the memo, and I had filed it, along with a copy of the wire transfer from an offshore account. It was all there. Dates, amounts, account numbers. A neat little roadmap to a man's ruin. Daniel's personal lawyer was a man named Arthur Vance, a junior partner at our firm back then. Ambitious. Slick. Arthur was the one who handled the paperwork for Thorne's blind trust. I remembered his nervous sweat, the way he kept adjusting his tie. He knew. Of course. He knew. And now, he was a powerful attorney in Willow Creek. He represented men like my son, men who believed they were above consequences. My plan was simple. The simplest plans are always the best. I went to the small desk in my bedroom. I took out my phone, the one Daniel bought me so he could keep track of me. Step 1, the photograph. I placed the ledger under the soft light of my reading lamp. I opened it to page 42. My hand was steady as I held the phone over the page. No flash. Perfect clarity. The ink was slightly faded, but every word, every number, was perfectly legible. I took the picture, one single shot. Step 2, the delivery system. I would not use my own email. That would be foolish. That would be the act of a scared old woman. I was not that woman anymore. I created a new email account, an anonymous one. The name I chose was simple. Jane Doe. It felt right. Step 3, the message. I attached the photograph to the new email. I typed Arthur Vance's private email address into the recipient line, an address I had memorized 15 years ago. In the subject line, I wrote a single word, correction, and in the body of the email, I wrote nothing at all. Nothing. A threat is a sign of weakness. It is a plea for a reaction, a demand for attention. Silence. On the other hand, silence is power. It doesn't ask for anything. It simply exists. It lets the other person's imagination, their own guilt, do all the work. It is a calculated whisper in a room full of shouting. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The point of no return. For a brief moment, I saw Daniel's face, not the monster from the kitchen, but the little boy with the wide, innocent eyes. A pang of something. Sadness. A mother's grief for a son she had already lost. Then I saw the broken porcelain on my floor. I felt the sting on my cheek, and I pressed send. The little icon on the screen confirmed it. Message sent. I closed the laptop. I put the ledger back in its hiding place, deep within a box of old Christmas ornaments in the attic. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel ate his breakfast without a word of thanks. I sipped my tea, and I waited. I did not know what would happen next. Not exactly. But I knew the silence had been broken, not by my screams, but by a whisper. A whisper that was about to become a hurricane. The house was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked. 1 minute. 2. 5. Then, my phone rang. It vibrated on the table. A low, urgent hum against the wood. I looked at the screen. An unknown number. Block. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then, with a hand that was as steady as a surgeon's, I picked it up, and I answered. The Unraveling. After I pressed send, the world did not change. The clock on the wall still ticked. The afternoon sun still slanted through the blinds. But the air in my house felt different. It was charged. Electric. I had cast a stone into a dark, silent pond. And now, all I could do was wait for the ripples. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. But the area code was for downtown Houston. I let it ring 3 times, just to hear the sound. Then, I answered. Hello, my voice was steady, calm. There was a pause on the other end. Mrs. Peterson, a man's voice asked. It was a voice I knew, a voice I had heard for years through the speakerphone in Mr. Pierce's office. Mark Callahan, but the voice was different now. The usual arrogance, the smooth, confident tone of a man used to being in charge, was gone. It was replaced by something else, a thin veneer of professionalism, stretched tight over a drum of panic. This is she. I said, Mrs. Peterson, Helen, he began, trying for a friendly tone that didn't quite land. I'm calling on behalf of your son, Daniel. It seems there may have been some misunderstandings regarding his financial arrangements with you. I said nothing. I just listened to the silence. Let him fill it. He continued, and I could hear the slight tremor in his voice. We believe it would be beneficial for all parties to sit down, to discuss things, to clear the air. I looked at a framed photo on my mantelpiece. It was of Daniel when he was 10, holding up a Little League trophy, his smile missing a front tooth. Discuss what? Mr. Callahan, I asked, my voice as placid as a summer lake. Well, just to ensure you are comfortable with the current situation, he stammered, to make sure everything is in order. In order. The man was a poet. I see, I said. I let another long moment pass. I wanted him to feel it. The shift, the seismic change in the ground beneath his feet. Perhaps you're right. I finally said, a discussion might be beneficial. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. I could hear it. A faint hiss over the line. Excellent. My office? Tomorrow at 10. No, I said. It was a simple word, but it held all the power in the world. No, I will not be coming to your office. Mr. Callahan, if we are to meet, it will be on my terms. The unraveling of my son began that evening. Daniel came home from work, and the change was immediate. He no longer walked into the house like he owned it. He entered quietly, cautiously, like a stranger. He didn't drop his briefcase by the door. He placed it down gently. He didn't demand his dinner. He found me in the living room, reading a book. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. I didn't look up, but I could feel his eyes on me. I just kept turning the pages. Mom, he said. His voice was small. I finished my paragraph before I looked up, peering at him over the top of my reading glasses. Yes. Daniel. He couldn't hold my gaze. His eyes darted around the room, landing on everything but me. The curtains, the floor lamp, the worn spot on the armchair. Did you have a good day? He asked. It was the first time in over a year he had asked me that question. The first time he had shown an ounce of interest in my existence beyond what I could do for him. It was a quiet day, I replied, and I went back to my book. For the rest of the night, he was a ghost in his own home. He paced in his room. I could hear the floorboards creaking above my head, back and forth, a caged animal. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't make any calls. He just paced. The confident, cruel man who had struck me over a bowl of soup was gone. In his place was a frightened boy. A 40-year-old boy who had finally realized the playground bully had just been challenged by someone he never saw coming. I felt a surge of something. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was a cold, quiet satisfaction. The kind a watchmaker might feel after a complex timepiece, long broken, finally starts to tick again. My world was slowly being set right, but as I lay in bed that night, listening to the frantic rhythm of his footsteps overhead, another feeling crept in. A small, aching pang in my chest. It was pity. I saw the scared little boy again, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I had created that man upstairs. I had loved him, coddled him, and perhaps, in my own way, I had enabled him, his weakness, his greed. Some of that was my failure too. I looked at my son, not with hatred, but with a deep, profound sadness for the man he could have been. This journey is a lonely one. What do you think of this turn of events? Please help me by commenting with a short emotion below, just so I know there are friends walking with me on this path. Your presence is the greatest encouragement for me to tell the final part of this story, of how a mother took back her justice. Terms of surrender. I chose the place. The Willow Creek Diner, a small, bright place downtown, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that played old Motown hits. It was public. It was neutral. And it was my territory. I had been coming here for coffee with my late husband, Robert, every Saturday morning for 30 years. I arrived 10 minutes early. I chose a booth in the back, facing the door. I ordered a black coffee and waited. I didn't feel nervous. I felt calm, like a CEO about to close a deal she had been preparing for her entire career. They arrived together. Arthur Vance, the lawyer, looked older than I remembered. His expensive suit seemed a size too big, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He carried a worn leather briefcase. Daniel followed a step behind him, like a chastised child. My son, the big sales director, looked small, defeated. He wouldn't meet my eyes. They slid into the booth opposite me. The vinyl squeaked under their weight. A young waitress came over, but Arthur waved her away with a flick of his wrist. Helen, Arthur began, his voice a low, forced whisper. There has been a misunderstanding. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was hot, bitter. I set the cup down carefully on the saucer. It made a soft clinking sound in the quiet diner. There is no misunderstanding. Arthur, I said. My voice was even, level. The voice I used for 40 years to speak with judges and senators and men who thought they owned the world. There is only a situation, and we are here to resolve it. Arthur opened his briefcase. His hands fumbled with the clasp. He was rattled. Good. My client, Daniel, is prepared to make amends, he said, avoiding my gaze. He is willing to compensate you for any emotional distress. I almost laughed. Compensate me, as if my dignity had a price tag. I looked past the lawyer. I looked directly at my son. For the first time, he was forced to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot. Scared. You will not compensate me, Daniel, I said. You will restore what you have stolen. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. A list. I had typed it up that morning. I slid it across the table. It came to a stop right in front of him. Here are the terms, I said. Arthur leaned forward to read it, but I held up a hand. No, Arthur, this is between my son and me. Daniel's eyes scanned the page. His face went pale. First, I said, my voice cutting through the low hum of the diner. You will transfer every cent you took from my savings and retirement accounts back into my name. Today, the full amount, plus interest calculated at the prime rate. I paused. Let the words sink in. Second, you will pay off the second mortgage you took out on my house. In full. I want the deed. Clean and clear. In my name and my name only. On my kitchen table by Friday. Daniel swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. Third, the power of attorney document I signed is to be legally nullified. Arthur has the paperwork in his briefcase. You will sign it. Now. I glanced at Arthur. He flinched and quickly pulled a sheaf of papers from his briefcase, pushing them across the table. Fourth, I continued. My eyes locked on Daniel. Your name will be removed from my will and from any joint assets we may have. We will sever all financial ties. I leaned forward slightly. My voice dropped, but it lost none of its steel. And fifth, you will pack your things. You will be out of my house by sundown tomorrow, and you will not contact me again, not by phone, not by email, not in person. To me, from that moment on, you will be a stranger. Do you understand these terms? He just stared at the paper, speechless. Arthur finally found his voice. Helen, this is quite severe. Perhaps we can discuss. We are not discussing. Arthur, I said, turning my cool gaze on him. We are concluding. As for your other client, Mr. Thorne, I trust his historical documents are safe. For now, as long as these terms are met, I see no reason for any old paperwork to see the light of day. It can remain a private, historical matter. The threat was unspoken, but it hung in the air between us, thicker than the smell of frying bacon. Arthur's face went white. He knew exactly what I meant. The ledger. He knew I had more than just one page. He turned to Daniel. His voice was sharp. Sign the papers. Daniel? Daniel looked at me, his eyes pleading. For a moment, I saw the little boy again, the one who had scraped his knee. Mom, he whispered. My name is Helen Peterson. I said. The words were like ice. Sign the papers. He picked up the pen Arthur offered him. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed the first document. His signature, a jagged, ugly scrawl. Then the next, and the next, the terms of surrender. When he was done, he pushed the papers back across the table. He looked broken, a hollowed-out version of the man who had stood over me in my kitchen. I gathered the signed documents. I folded my list and put it back in my handbag. I stood up. I placed a few dollars on the table for the coffee. I looked down at my son one last time. Goodbye. Daniel, I said. Then I turned, and I walked out of the diner, into the bright Texas sunlight, without looking back. I didn't need to. I had won. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply erased him, and in doing so, I had finally reclaimed myself. The quiet after the storm. After he left, the silence he left behind was different. It wasn't the ringing, shocked silence that had followed the slap. It was a deep, profound quiet, the kind of quiet that fills a house after a long illness has finally ended. For days, I moved through these rooms like a ghost. I'd find myself pausing in the hallway, expecting to hear his key in the lock, or stopping by the stove, my hand reaching for the pot I used to make his favorite stew. Before remembering, there is a muscle memory to motherhood, and mine was aching from a phantom limb. The first week was the hardest. The grief was a physical thing, a heavy, weighted blanket that made it difficult to get out of bed in the morning. I would sit in the living room, the ledger still on the coffee table, and just stare. I was grieving the son I had. But more than that, I was grieving the son I thought I had. The loss of an illusion is a strange kind of death. There is no body to bury, only a space in your heart that is suddenly, terribly empty. The first real change came on a Tuesday. I walked into Marcus's old bedroom. It hadn't really been his for 20 years, but it was still his space. His high school yearbooks were on the shelf, a few dusty trophies, a faded poster of a basketball player on the wall. For years, I had kept it as a sort of shrine, a monument to the boy he was. But that boy was gone. The man he had become wanted nothing to do with this room, or this house, or me. So, I began. I took down the poster, leaving a pale rectangle on the wallpaper. I packed the yearbooks and trophies into a cardboard box. I didn't throw them away. I couldn't. I sealed the box with tape and carried it, heavy as it was, up to the attic. I wasn't erasing him. I was archiving him, placing him in the past, where he now belonged. When the room was empty, scrubbed clean and smelling of lemon polish, it wasn't sad. It was just a room, a quiet, peaceful space filled with afternoon light, a blank page. I started making phone calls to friends I hadn't seen in months. Friends I had politely put off because I was always waiting to see what Marcus's plans were. I called Martha from my old book club. I called David, my neighbor who had lost his wife a few years back. We had coffee on my front stoop. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. We talked about David's unruly roses and the new biography Martha was reading. We talked about simple, ordinary things, and in that simplicity, I felt a flicker of my old self return, the Eleanor who existed before she was just Marcus's mother. Then, about 3 months later, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Eleanor. The voice on the other end was hesitant, small. It was Tiffany. I was silent for a moment. My heart did a strange little flip in my chest. Yes, I said. I just wanted to. I enrolled in a class, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. At the community college, for accounting. I thought you should know. I didn't know what to say. That's good. Tiffany. I managed. There was a long pause. I could hear her take a shaky breath. And, I'm sorry, she whispered. It wasn't a demand for forgiveness. It wasn't a plea. It was just a statement. A fact laid bare. For everything. I'm so sorry. And then she hung up. I stood there holding the phone for a long time. The apology didn't fix what was broken. It couldn't. But it was something. A tiny seed of accountability planted in scorched earth. A sign that she was, perhaps, starting to walk her own path. Away from the man who had led her down such a dark one. That phone call spurred me to action. I thought about the upstairs apartment. The space they had coveted. The space that had been the catalyst for so much pain. Leaving it empty felt wrong. It felt like a victory for them. A monument to their greed. So I had an idea. I called a carpenter, the son of an old friend of James's. We took out the kitchenette and the dividing walls. We built floor-to-ceiling bookshelves along every wall. We brought in comfortable armchairs and good reading lamp. It's not a library for the whole city. It's just for our block. The Bed-Stuy book nook. David calls it, the neighborhood children come after school. The older folks come in the mornings. We have a poetry group that meets on Wednesdays. The space is no longer empty. It's filled with whispers and turning pages and the quiet hum of community. It is no longer a symbol of what they tried to take. It is a symbol of what I chose to give back, and I started to write. Not a book for anyone else to read. Just for me. I bought a simple, cloth-bound journal and a good pen, and I began to write this story down. From the very beginning. I wrote about the boy with the snails, and the man with the cold eyes. I wrote about the sting of the slap and the quiet healing that followed. I found that by putting the words on the page, I could finally make sense of them. I wasn't just telling a story of what was done to me. I was taking ownership of it. I was writing myself back into existence. Lessons in ink and silence. It's autumn now in Willow Creek. The leaves on the old oak tree in my front yard are turning shades of rust and gold. I sit here in my favorite armchair, the one Robert always used to fall asleep in, with a warm cup of tea and a wool blanket across my lap. The house is quiet, but it's a different kind of quiet now. It's not the heavy, suffocating silence of fear. It's peace. The deep, settled peace that comes after a long storm. Daniel is gone. His presence has been erased from this house, scrubbed clean like the soup stains from the kitchen floor. Sometimes, I find myself pausing, listening for the sound of his heavy footsteps on the stairs. And then I remember, he is just a memory now, a sad story that belongs to another woman. In another lifetime. The ledger sits on the small table beside me. For weeks after Daniel left, I debated what to do with it. My first thought was to burn it, to watch the secrets turn to ash in the fireplace and float away into the night. It felt like the right thing to do, a cleansing, a final, definitive end. But I didn't. One evening, as the fire crackled, I ran my fingers over the worn leather cover. This book, it wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a testament to 40 years of my life, of paying attention, of listening, of understanding that the most important things are often not what is said aloud, but what is written down in the margins. It was proof that a quiet woman in a quiet office could hold more power than all the shouting men in their expensive suit. So, I took it upstairs, and I placed it back in its box of old Christmas ornaments. Not to be used again, but to be remembered. It's a part of my story. You learn things. At my age, you learn that life isn't about grand victories, but about small, quiet acts of survival. And sitting here, in the warmth of my own home, my own sanctuary, I've had a lot of time to think about the lessons this long storm has taught me. I've learned about motherhood. A mother's love is not a blank check. It's not an endless well you can draw from without ever putting anything back. It is a garden, and it needs to be tended with both gentleness and strong fences. We teach our children how to fly, but we must also teach them that our sky is not theirs to own. We give them roots, but we are not the soil they can endlessly take from without consequence. We are trees, not the forest. I've learned about sons, and daughters too. I suppose what you build by tearing someone else down is just a sandcastle against the tide. Respect is not something you demand, it's something you earn. It's a seed you plant in the soil of someone else's heart through kindness, through gratitude, through simple human decency, and you will, always, harvest exactly what you have sown. Daniel sowed salt, and in the end, that is all he was left with, a barren field. And finally, I've learned something about this modern world we live in. It's a loud place, full of noise. Everyone is shouting to be heard, posting their lives for everyone to see. We judge people by the volume of their voice, the confidence in their smile. But true power, true strength, it often resides in the quiet. It's in what people know, not just what they say. It's in the details they notice, the facts they record in silence, sometimes. A single whisper, backed by the undeniable weight of truth, can silence an entire chorus of lies. That is the final lesson I learned, not from any law book, not from any grand speech, but from the faded ink in an old ledger, the ledger of a 67-year-old black woman in a quiet house in Willow Creek, Texas. And that, I think, is a story worth remembering. And with that, a mother's silence becomes her final, resounding word. Helen's war is over, but I have to ask you, was her justice truly complete? Is there a part of you that wishes for more, or perhaps for less? The line between justice and revenge is a thin one. The comment section is our space to explore these difficult questions. I value your perspective immensely and will be reading right alongside you. If this story found a place in your heart, please take a moment to like and share, and subscribe to Dipu Kader Stories. Each action is a signal that you want more stories that challenge, empower, and make us think. Thank you for listening. And remember, within every quiet life, there is a powerful story waiting for the right moment to be told.